Welcome to the FinancialMD show. I'm your host, John Solitro. Joining me as always, Dr. Trevor Smith.
Hey.
Good evening to all. Whatever time you're listening to this, it's an evening to us. I'm in a hoodie today because it just feels like that kind of day. It's gray and rainy here in Michigan, and that's okay. It's almost October, and it's supposed to be that way. We get spoiled with an Indian summer from time to time, and we had that last week and got that out of our system.
Yep, just got to
Ready
soak
to
it up.
face the
I
season.
actually hit the beach on Saturday, but it was quite a windy
It
Michigan
was.
beach day. But we still like those, right? I mean, you got to soak it up when you got
Oh,
it.
absolutely. Like we went to, you know where Shelby is? Hart,
Oh
Whitehall.
yeah, actually, yeah. I've been
We were
there
there
a
Friday.
handful of times. Yep,
Yep. So
it's
walked
a
down to
great
the beach
area.
there. We love it. Yeah. We're actually looking at a house up there.
Oh, cool.
Alrighty.
Adjusting some
So
lighting here.
we are stoked today. I love covering the basics because as tedious and boring as they might seem, they are super useful and super practical. So today is going
Yep.
to be the quick and dirty with a few tips on budget, specifically a resident budget. We can talk about attendings a little bit. They are a little more difficult to get into a budget, although I personally believe that budget's good for everyone.
Yeah.
Not necessarily budget meaning here's all you have to spend and you have to stick to this, but we'll talk about this a little bit today. I do a kind of what I call a reverse budgeting approach, and I think it works for everybody. But it helps you to put the main things, and make sure that you are focusing on the priorities that you're supposed to be focusing on, no matter what stage in your career. So we'll give a few tips to start off, but I guess first, Trevor, give me your experience perspective, getting out of med school, into residency. What was your budgeting approach, your cash flow management? What did you do? What helped? What didn't work?
Sure. I mean, before med school, I went pretty much straight through. I took a little bit of time off, just by default because I ended up applying the fall after my senior year in college.
Okay.
But so yeah, there was that like kind of spring, summer default time off. But yeah, I was pretty much a regular going from college into med school.
Okay.
So I wasn't making any money, so it didn't really matter how much budget. It was just like, don't spend all the money in your bank account because you're making like a couple $100 a week kind of situation.
This was in
But
med
then
school?
getting into med school, that was like right before med school.
Okay.
Then getting into med school, and starting med school, I didn't think a lot about it, which is not surprising in any way, but
No.
I essentially was just like, okay, again, this is the money in my bank account. I wasn't working a job. I knew a few people that worked during med school, but it was usually like side gigs. I remember talking to a med student not that long ago who like grew tree frogs and like sold those, like kind of rare tree frogs. Unless you have like a random kind of like side gig or a pre-existing business, it's kind of hard to do in med school.
Oh yeah.
But
Sure.
you get your money from the student loan,
Right.
not, I want to say disbursement, right? At the
Disbursement. Yeah,
beginning of
that's probably a good word.
disbursement. At the beginning of the semester. So you just get like this big lump sum amount of money, and then it's supposed to last you the calendar year.
Which is,
And
I've always had a problem with doing it that way. I feel like they could do a little more
yeah,
to help stretch it out a little bit or break it up into
or
little
even
chunks.
just to like, yeah, they should be breaking it up into little chunks because it's a great way for them to just make more interest
Mm-hmm.
slowly over that whole year. The earlier somebody gives you money, the more interest they make off of you holding on to it for a period of time.
Yeah, so
But
that's probably why they do it. Right?
yeah, I'm not sure the details on that of like when it starts accruing interest. I think it might actually be after you graduate.
And that's probably true on student loans. Yeah.
I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't gain any interest until after you graduate. But
Yep.
regardless, they do give it to you up front, and it doesn't inspire, super rational decision making. I remember I bought like a $300 pair of glasses, sunglasses, and you don't need really you don't need sunglasses most of the time. And this is an ophthalmologist talking. You could buy a really cheap pair, and they would pretty much get the job done. And most of them have nice filters and all that stuff you need for eye
Okay.
health.
Totally.
But anyways, like I can't imagine how much I actually paid for that, because usually depending on how long you wait along the way, a good 10 years later, you've paid, at least probably twice as much. So that was like a $600 plus pair of $300 sunglasses.
Sure.
But yeah, so for budgeting, I wasn't doing a ton of budgeting. I was just trying not to spend money. And there was a
Good
period of
start.
time where I was planning on doing like international medical health stuff. So I
Okay.
was trying to keep it really tight, really minimum. Um, and I just used Mint. That was not too much longer. Like that was kind of in the Mint heyday. Like I can't remember when it came out, but I want to say it came out in the mid to late 2000s, or got pretty big in the late 2000s. And I thought that was going to be like a great product, and they build it out. And I think a lot of people actually thought that.
Oh
But
yeah.
I just had automated stuff for credit cards, um, and connected it with my student loans and different bank accounts, and kind of used that a little bit in residency, but it never ended up having like really feature build out. So I just did automated stuff and tried to ballpark some different categories. And I read the Dave Ramsey book, and I tried envelopes with cash, which is hilarious
Oh
because
yeah.
nobody does that anymore. Nobody carries cash.
No, and that's
Any
part of the reason I
solution,
don't is because if I carry cash, I'll
yeah.
spend it typically, is what I find. Even if it's in envelopes, it's
It
gonna float out of there.
Yeah, I mean, if I had an envelope of cash right now for my spending per month, like that would be an irresponsible amount of spending. Like imagine you like pulled it out and you actually did the full thing, and you included like your student loans.
Right.
You know,
Here's
it's just like,
$10,000. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like there's just it's a it's a good method. It was a good method, I would say. That's pretty much a retired method in my opinion. But yeah, so I didn't do a lot of that then, and then in residency I did, and in fellowship I did, keep an eye on spending. But my philosophy on budgeting ended up, even before I read this book that I just read this last year called "I Will Teach You to Be Rich"
Hmm.
by Ramit Sethi. Awesome, really really good book because it's so doable and practical.
All right. We
I
will
was
stick
pretty
that in the
much
show
just
notes.
spending. Oh yeah, that's a great one. He kind of talks about like just enjoy the things that you enjoy. Like you're gonna spend money. Part of the reason you have money is to enjoy it, and you should just pick a couple categories where you won't ruin your goals by quote unquote overspending, according to financial gurus. So
Hmm.
just like overspend on lattes or overspend on pizza, or like whatever you really enjoy, and just enjoy the heck out of it. So for me, like that category has always been restaurants. Like I'll spend definitely in the hundreds of dollars on restaurants every month. I just prefer
Yep.
to eat at a restaurant than make meals most nights of the week. And I'm single, so I'm not paying for, two kids and a partner. So like I can afford to buy myself a $30 meal like a few times a week. Um, and it's not going to move the needle. If you do the math, it's not even going to move the needle on
Yeah.
paying off my loans. I could be debt free approximately like 2 or 3 weeks earlier if I sacrificed for like 2 years,
Right.
reining
It's
in the spending on restaurants every single month for 2 years, 24 months in a row. I could be debt free like 2 or 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah, it's
And I
that
was
cost
just like,
benefit
that is
analysis,
not
right?
worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not worth it. So that's I think Ramit Sethi has probably had more of an impact for me on like feeling comfortable with
Hmm.
spending in different areas, sort of like a non-traditional budget approach. And
Yeah.
then I talked to other friends too. Anybody who has a high income, and it's weird to think that like I'm one of those people now, but if you have a high income, you don't have to quite you can kind of like ballpark your budgeting to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of student loans, and I'm aggressively paying them off. But you have cushion if you have a decent amount coming in. So for the residents, you have to keep it tight. Those little like refinancing your student loans and only having $100 a month payment, I did that, made a huge difference.
Yep.
And then I didn't have to feel as guilty about spending on things I enjoyed while still not going crazy.
Yep.
And then now I just allow myself a little bit more freedom, and in the hundreds of dollars range for restaurants. That's like definitely my big category. And if I try hard to lower it, it stays the same. If I try hard to spend extra, it like magically stays the same.
Okay.
It's
So you
like
kind of
I
found your
spend
number.
the exact same amount. Yeah. And I'm just like, well, why feel bad about it? Like I'm not gonna ever like blow the roof off, and it's not gonna move the needle for any of my goals. So that's what I
Yeah.
do. It's been good.
Well, I think part of that too, and a lot of this budget conversation can revolve around the uh, geography and area that you live in as well. A lot of things play into this budget
Oh, it's so
conversation.
true.
I mean, I had a resident,
Yep.
anesthesiology resident in New York City, and
Right.
different story on budget. And she's like,
Yeah.
we're walking through our whole budget exercise at our first meeting, and we get to the eating out category, and she's like, probably $2,000 a month. And I'm like, what? Like, you know, and
Wow.
now, yes, she's in New York, but still, New York residents don't make any more than residents anywhere else for the most part. So
Right. Right.
there's it's easier to spend a lot of money in New York. I get that, but it just probably takes that much more discipline to not spend that. And um, the other thing about a budget is,
That's a lot of
like you
money.
said, we're talking about mindset, philosophy, on
Hmm.
budget, on spending. The book you're talking about sounds like it kind of gave you a mindset shift a little bit on spending and cash flow,
Yep.
um, and a lot of that comes from how we were raised and our environment.
Hmm.
There's that whole nature nurture conversation of some of us are just, no matter how we were raised, we're going to be terrible spenders or great savers or whatever case might be.
Hmm.
Um, but I think our parents and our culture we came from certainly has some impact on that. My dad was uh, pretty frugal. He made good money, but you wouldn't know it, and he's kind of that millionaire next
Hmm.
door that retired with a couple $1,000,000 in a 401k, which was plenty for him because he didn't have a big lifestyle to maintain, and he's never going to spend all his retirement investments.
That's great.
Plus he's got a pension, so it's just even more, it's just going to sit there. And I have to like
Hmm.
push him to be like, Dad, you can spend some money, spend something, buy a Corvette, like do that
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but so that certainly rubbed off a little bit on me, but like all of us do with our parents, we take a little bit of the good and a little bit of the bad and create our own. But I'm I'm probably more frugal than some, but not as cautious and conservative as my dad was. And I'm a little
Hmm.
more of maybe it's the millennial in me. And I'm just kind of on that borderline that's like, there's still some value in experiences. And, you know, a dollar isn't just a dollar. To my dad, it was. Everything could be put a price tag on it.
Right.
And I think my wife and I feel a little bit differently.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think yeah, there's all those like kind of hot articles about like if you stop eating lattes, it'll be worth like, $100,000 in 30 years and stuff. It's like, but then you went 30 years without eating a latte or
But
drinking a
then you
latte
went 30 years, right?
or eating a pizza or whatever. It's like that sucks, man. Who wants to live that life? I mean,
Yeah.
and it's not about $100 at that point. If you did that with bigger things like, a nice car, if you just like slam dunk the more expensive stuff, then like, yeah, like a really nice car for me right now would be like giving up $1 million in retirement. Like, okay,
Yep.
that's worth thinking about. That's worth thinking about for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe you're gonna be worth, if you're gonna plan on being worth $25 million, then you're like, okay, well, do I want to just have a fast car when I'm 55, or would it be more actually fun to have one when I'm like 35? Like that's a fair
Yeah.
trade-off, as long as you're making the trade-off like you're seeing it for what it is. That's I mean, you can do that.
Well,
Um,
and that kind of leads to what I was telling you before. I mean, my wife and I were looking at this house in Lake Michigan, and
yeah,
um, I don't make $1 million
right.
a year. I'm not, we're not in that category where it necessarily makes sense right now. But we
Hmm.
just kind of had a frank conversation earlier this year, and we're like, how about we not wait for retirement on some of these dreams? Why do these have to be retirement dreams? What if we just got a little bit
Right.
creative and tried to find a way to make this work now? And it's kind of one of those like
Hmm.
strangest secret things where it's like the secret, you speak something and you kind of have it on your mind and it'll just somehow magically happen. And we're like, okay, we're going to
Hmm.
start taking step towards that. We're going to research it. We're going to talk to people, and let's just like believe that this is going to happen at some point, and maybe a way will come out. And so like the house we were looking at this week was right now out of our price range just to get it and use it. But I've started talking
Hmm.
to some really interesting people that have had profitable vacation rentals in that area.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
I'm just like, if we can just break even. And so I've met several different property management companies that specialize in vacation rentals, and they can run some numbers for me and tell me. And I'm starting to see
Hmm.
like, I think this could work, and I don't have to spend any of my money.
Hmm.
So that's
Yep.
exactly, it's that same kind of thing where it's like, maybe we don't put this off. I mean, life is short, of course, but,
Hmm.
um, and then just the concept of a dollar today is worth more than a dollar, not inflation standpoint, but just to me. You and I are going to have more
That's
money
right.
in 20 years than we do now. And so
Hmm.
I know if we
Right.
put that away and it grows and invests, that's great. But there are things that have value today. Uh, anyway, there's a dollar has different value in different places. So for example, I talk to residents all the time
Yes.
about the conversation of, should I take this dollar and pay my credit card down or put it in savings? And I always say, like, if you don't have an emergency fund built up, you need to get that done, because in my mind, a dollar liquid in the bank ready to use is more valuable than that same dollar put on a credit card, even though yes, it pays off interest and blah blah blah, but right now for you, that's more valuable in the bank and savings. That'll change in 6 to 12 months when they have their emergency fund funded. Then yeah, maybe we can talk about
Hmm.
paying down your credit card.
Right.
But it kind of, yeah, gets into that just value conversation. um, So talk to me. You got into residency, you used Mint and kind of started to work with that a little bit. What did you find? What
Yeah.
else did you find that worked well when you got out of, well, I guess let me just kind of go back to med school a little bit. Did you find something that worked well when you got that lump sum disbursement that helped you to kind of hang on to some of that, I definitely have
No,
had some
I'd
friends that
say
spent a
like
lot.
I couldn't really figure out what to do correctly on that, and most of my time was just spent studying. It really genuinely was like
Yeah.
you you study the first year a lot and you think that all of that stuff you learn is going to really matter, and a lot of it actually doesn't. But you're kind of just learning how to study to a certain degree too.
Fair
Like it was a
enough.
lot
Yeah.
of inefficient study time, but I think you kind of, for me, I had to do that. And then I was efficient to study the more valuable material the second year. And
Hmm.
I went to University of Michigan, and they've even changed their curriculum substantially now. You get into rotations a lot earlier, even in the second year, I think. And
Okay.
um, it's a little bit different. But anyways, back to the budgeting. I mean, I got a bunch of money. I didn't really know what to do with it. So, but I didn't want to like pay it back. I didn't want to like give it back because I didn't really know what to do if I ran out, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I was like, okay, so I've got like, I don't know, I don't even know what the numbers were. Let's say it's like 8,000 or $10,000, and it's just like sitting there in the bank, and then I'm paying 700 or 800 a month in rent month after month. And I kind of like just ballpark calculated it out, and I was like, this is how much food is going to cost, and then maybe some other amounts of things I'm going to spend here and there, a little bit of clothes or stuff.
Hmm.
I'm not a big spender, so it wasn't like I was planning on like breaking the bank at J. Crew like every other week. Not that they're like a place people shop anymore, I don't think. But
No, they actually filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah, I'm pretty which is hilarious because I'm sure I spent money there,
Yeah.
probably more than I could afford. But, yeah, so I guess it would have been nice to just have somebody to be like, "Okay, let me help you figure out how much money you actually need for the year, and then, okay, are you gonna work in the summer or not?
Right.
Okay, if you're not going to, then you need money for that." Like, budgeting to project in the future during med school would have been smart.
So budgeting like
Budgeting
a
to
semester at a
actually
time.
yeah, or even like I think in yeah, semester at a time, and then they don't make it easy for you because they kind of like wait to tell you how much tuition is gonna be until later. So it's like it would
Interesting.
have been nice to be able to project annually, but I'm thinking now, I don't think they told you like the exact amount until maybe early winter or spring semester. They'd be like, we think it's going to be approximately, $50,000 again, but it's going to be probably an extra. I think they tacked on like 1 or 2 thousand per year each year increase, which is
Nice.
insane.
And that's
It's like
the
five.
racket that is universities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like 5 to 10% increase per year.
Yeah. Way above
Um,
inflation, but it's another topic for another time. Another
yeah,
rant for another
definitely.
time.
Yeah, so if I was thinking like what would have helped me, it would have been like somebody to step in and try to help me figure out how much I actually needed because I'm 100% sure I borrowed more than I needed all 4
Hmm.
years.
Yep.
Um, or even to sort of like get a financial coaching before I started, like, hey, if you like get some roommates, you can cut your costs by like 30%.
Yep.
And it's not a ton. It's fine to do your own thing and spend money on housing and stuff. But for 4 years straight, that's 48 months. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of rent. Splitting that with other people is smart. I did that. I had really cheap rent living in a
Okay.
like a co-op. So I did pretty good. That was probably part of the reason I had extra money because they
Yeah.
went by averages. But they just give you a ton of money and then you're like not really sure what to do with it. So
It's
that's
crazy.
in retrospect, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, sure I went to college, but still, just like you graduate from high school without a financial education, you graduate from college without a financial education just fine if you're pre-med.
Yeah. Yeah. So what changed when you went into residency then?
Well, the thing that changes when you enter residency is you're not like an adolescent anymore. You're like this delayed adolescent if you went straight through for college.
Hmm.
Anyone who had a job, there's tons of people who do that. They go do consulting for some, 3 years, 5 years or something,
Yep.
go back
Research or
and do
something.
medicine.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's something. I mean, anything where you're like really paying your own bills substantially. Um, I mean, just to be honest, like I worked at restaurants or coffee shops before med school, and then I borrowed the money I needed to live on for all of med school. I didn't work, so I started residency, and you're in over your head in a bunch of different ways. But then you finally have to be an adult. I mean, you have to pay your bills. Your
Yep.
budget becomes really really real because you're like, okay, my med school sat down with me for an exit interview instead. You can either do like student loan forgiveness in form A, B, C, or D, or you can start paying and it's going to be this many thousands of dollars starting like 3 months in.
Mm.
And you're like, okay, these are some really rough options here. So then you run the numbers. If you have any interest in not like defaulting on your loans or losing your housing or not having enough money to spend on things that you enjoy,
Yeah.
like that was the driver for me. I was like, I'm not going to have enough money in my checking account if I don't figure this out. Because as a resident, you definitely are living like month to month.
Yep.
Um, and that's just the way it is. So some people rack up credit card debt or personal loans, but that's less common, or they maybe get early. Some of the savvy people, like the radiologists in certain professions, you can sign early with companies or with
Yep.
hospitals. They'll pay you throughout. So there's some
Oh
much
yeah.
more savvy ways to do it than what I was thinking about. I wasn't even considering that. And that's not super available in my field of ophthalmology.
Hmm.
People don't really do that. So it's not handed down or advised from people years ahead of me.
Yeah.
But you have to budget when you know you're running out of money, like constantly. So that
Yep.
was the motivator for me.
Yeah. And so Yeah, that's one of the things that we start doing in residency is starting to, okay, and we try to start this as early as we can. They know what their salary is going to be. So I do a quick projection on what we put together, this basically a spreadsheet that breaks it down. Okay, here's your income. Here's what your taxes are probably going to be. Any other paycheck deductions. Here's what your take home will be. Let's start breaking down the things that here's what your rent's going to be, and you're kind of work through those fixed expenses. Then we kind of ballpark some of the discretionary stuff, like um, going out to eat or just any of that stuff. And then we get down to kind of the big final number, which is maybe not big, but the final number, which is the surplus. And every single line
Mhm.
item of expense takes away a little bit more from that surplus. And they see, okay, here's what you should have in your surplus. And the number that appears in that surplus calculation is very rarely the number that actually is in their surplus or in their bank. When they look at it, they're like, oh, that says I should have $5,000 a month, or that says I should have
Yeah.
$500 a month left over. No, they're like,
Hmm.
there's no way. And I'm like, well, let's go back and look at it. I mean, the math looks right. So
Hmm.
what we do is we say, okay, I said, if this looks right, these expenses look right, then this is just the surplus you should have. And they're like, yeah, I guess so. And that's normal. Like money just goes places and most people have no idea. I mean, most of us, and
Hmm.
here's kind of tip number one, if we take a look at your checking account or your credit card, most people can find like little subscriptions, stupid things they forgot about that's costing $5, $6, $8, $10 a month. And that stuff
Right.
adds up. You can find $50 a month sometimes just by getting rid of those things. I forget
Oh
what they
yeah.
call it. There's a term for it now, like phantom subscriptions or something like that. But
Hmm.
um, so someone put out a number about how many Netflix knows how many of these there are. They know how many people pay and have not actually been on their account in like 6 to 12 months.
Oh wow.
It's so crazy, the number. I can't remember what it is, but it's like, and like, it's like, and then what? And they're like, what do you want us to do? Like reach out to these people and ask them to stop paying? No. Like,
That's
but there's,
crazy.
yeah. And a lot of us, it's probably not Netflix, but have some sort of subscription like that. So anyway, I call it reverse
Oh
budgeting because it's, in my mind, it's that thing
yeah.
that is, we start with the end. So once we get to that surplus, I have the conversation with the residents and just say, hey, okay, um, how do we, what can we do to be smart with the surplus? And then basically it becomes a lot easier because then I say, okay, let me help you with this $500 a month surplus. I'll give you a few smart things to do with this. Then I tell them you can do whatever you want with the rest of it because you're making smart decisions with that surplus. You're doing the important things that you have to do, and you've got freedom to do what you want with the rest of it.
Hmm.
And we find that works pretty well. Let me
Yeah.
see if I can put a copy of this. I'll show you what the template looks like here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Once I became an attending, which is still very weird for me to say. Once I became like an attending, quote unquote attending, we'll just say private practice
Yep.
uh, doctor, I calculated that out. And the first time I calculated it out, I was like, oh, wow, I can pay off a lot of debt if I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I waited like a month or two and like I didn't pay off the debt and I didn't have more money in my bank account. It just was like I think I got a little more generous on paying for a tab at a dinner
Yep.
with friends one too
Sure.
many times. And I bought who knows what on Amazon, probably
Yep.
like some extra books and uh, I don't know. Definitely Amazon is my number one category, like disappearing category because it just says
Oh yeah.
Amazon.
That's the one,
It's
right?
not
Like
like,
we've started
oh,
putting in a whole separate
yeah,
category just for Amazon and in our budgets.
yeah, yeah. It's like, oh yeah, remember you bought that like really cool looking air filter? Like now your air is more filtered. Like great.
Right,
You
right,
know,
right.
it's like you can't do that like up several times a month. You can't buy. I'm a gadget guy. You can't just like buy gadgets. Like they're
Well, and that's the
expensive.
thing. Like, if you think of something or you see something online or you research something, the problem with Amazon is you can now 2 seconds later buy it. We had a little bit
Yeah.
of discipline before Amazon because before we'd have to go to the store to get it. And we're like, nah, I don't need it that bad.
Right.
So I feel
Hmm.
like it's a problem for consumers. So here's my uh,
Definitely.
spreadsheet I use. Um, so we put in the things we know, the income, any 401k deductions, and then we start working with the fixed expenses and work our way down. And then as we do, it starts kind of eating away at this surplus till we get to this yellow box here, which tells them
Yep.
in big
Yep.
bright letters what their surplus should be. And again, rarely is it actually that, but I say, okay, focus on this number. If we can do smart things with this number, you're going to really move the needle on your time in residency as far as, the impact that it makes on your financial future. And you can still live the lifestyle you want to live in residency and not have to suffer too bad. So we'll put this as a downloadable file in the show notes as well, so people can feel free to play around
Yeah.
with it and see if it does anything for them. But I find it's much easier to just focus on that one number instead of trying to stay within 10 different categories or more. All I say is, okay, I know you're busy. I know life is crazy right now in residency. Just focus on this number. Let's do smart things with this. And then I don't care what you do with the rest,
Yep.
because even if you spend everything else, you've at least kind of what they say, pay yourself first, right? Like,
Hmm. Yep.
whether it's saving, whether it's emergency fund, whether it's disability insurance, those are the things that we talk about and say, here's the order you should be doing things. And let's be
Hmm.
smart with that. So,
Yep. Yeah. I took that number and played around with it in my Excel with my budget. And then I ended up making like, multiple of the sheets at the bottom, like different kind of tabs or pages, whatever those are called.
yeah,
I think
yeah,
they're called sheets.
yep,
And I like used that number and I was like, okay, what if I like when I was job hunting earlier this year, I was like, what if I get a job that pays this? Or what if I get a job
yep,
that pays like signing bonus this? Or like, and I put in like all those things so that it would trickle down into this is the surplus you're going to have per month on the same overhead budget costs.
yep,
And then I looked at like, how fast can I pay off my loans? Okay. And then now I had like a magic number of like, this is when my loans are going to be paid off, like a
mm-hmm,
date, like in months from now, from basically from signing with
yep,
with whatever practice. And then I did like how many, okay, yeah, now I've got the same surplus. Then how many months until I'm quote unquote hitting a million in like retirement funds? And then
mm-hmm,
I had to figure out like what's my number, back calculate where I can live on $80,000 a year,
yep,
and then you like once you know what your surplus is per month, it enables you to project into the future, like what is my life going to look like in X number of months with a given scenario. So it gives you it empowers you to make better decisions for your life
yep,
and for your family, partner, whatever, like whoever you're considering in that scenario, family, wherever you want to live.
yeah.
And it's like informed decisions that are life changing, and it starts with a budget. So that's where it becomes like a powerful tool, not like a tool to be like, oh man, I can't get this latte.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's like you said, you can give yourself permission in that budget if you've still got a surplus, as long as you've still got a surplus. And so I think that's the
That's
big
right.
takeaway from today is, what is that number for you? How do you, step one, figure that out? Because knowing is half the battle. And then doing, what do you do with that surplus? Are you making smart decisions? And here at Financial MD, we can
Hmm.
certainly help with that. That's kind of our specialty. I feel like we're the only ones in the world that are spending the time and have a specific program for residents on how to get started on the right foot, how to build these habits early, and what to do with that surplus number. Find the surplus and then be smart with it. And sometimes we got to dig back in and cut some expenses and things because there is no surplus. But 95% of the time, we can find a surplus and enough that we can make some big impact. It doesn't feel like it today, but the decisions that you make today in residency are going to impact your financial future. Absolutely. And like I said, whether it's, and Trevor's talked about this before, whether it's disability insurance, getting it now will make a huge difference on your financial future. Making student loan decisions, refinancing, all that stuff can make a big decision. So we can't stress that enough, but find that surplus number. Let us know if you need help. You know how to reach us. Go to financialmd.com. Check out our videos. We've got the weekly didactic minute on YouTube. So subscribe to that and you'll get notified as soon as those come out every week. Little financial tips we put out. And then lastly, join the FinancialMD Facebook community and get involved in the conversation that's going on between other physicians, ideas, takeaways, and just different things to give you a little bit of an edge. So any final thoughts, Trevor?
That's it. I think I've shared more than enough from my life and experiences, and yeah, I agree. I think the big takeaway is what is that surplus number? I mean, that's like your tool. That's like your number one tool for planning your financial future. So
Yes, the catalyst,
it's
if you
fun.
will, right? It's
Yeah,
like your sleep
exactly.
number,
That's
you
exactly
know,
right.
like a sleep number mattress.
Yeah,
What's that number for you? So,
great.
all right, well, that's it. Again, I'm John, and this is Trevor. We're saying see you next time.